parents are the first teachers, and the family of origin is the first school of life and the basic unit of society. So most of the problems you see in the society can be traced to dysfunctional families of origin.
Without a doubt, we have all been influenced by how we grew up, the kind of parents we had, the parenting styles they had, the environment we grew up in. And that is the conversation we are having today.
The way God designed it is that parents are supposed to be the first teachers of their children. Because when parents are connected emotionally with their children, then they're able to correct. But when children are disconnected from their parents and you try to correct, it's not going to work.
Yeah, interesting. Dr. Eda is a medical doctor and a psychologist. She is the director and founder of Wastahili Family Wellness Center. She has a vast experience and knowledge in counseling psychology, and that places her at a better place to help us understand this whole question about parenting.
But actually, trauma starts from the moment of conception. Yeah, so if, for example, if the lady realizes that she's pregnant and she tells her husband or her boyfriend, I'm pregnant, his response is enough to traumatize or bless the child.
This episode was informed by a documentary I have been working on of a friend who has grown up in a children's home. I sought to understand how does that kind of environment affect how somebody grows up.
The cry cannot always be answered to. Sometimes there's a shortage of staff. Sometimes these staff members are on shifts.
I hope this episode will be as informative as it was for me.
There's a word people throw around a lot, which is narcissist. Narcissistic personality disorder, attracting somebody with codependency. Codependency, the word has been changed now. It has been diagnosed as a self-love deficit disorder, SLDD. So an SLDD will be attracted to somebody with a narcissistic personality disorder. Both of you came from dysfunctional families, but you internalized your pain differently. So you lost your authenticity. So now the healing comes when you...
Join me as we get deeper into this conversation. This is a wonderful time to subscribe to this channel and enjoy the conversations. 1, 2, 3, action. Thank you, Dr. Eda, for having us at your home and in your office. It's a privilege to be here, and we really appreciate this opportunity. So, as I searched about you, I realized that you are the founder of the Wastahili Family Wellness Center, and that you're passionate about, among other things, the next generation getting to self-actualization. So maybe you can tell us more about that, why you're passionate about it.
Yes, the reason why I'm passionate about it is that I'm a mental health survivor myself, multiple trauma survivor, and I lost my career because of that. Basically, I was pumped with drugs by psychiatrists. I was put in a box of a diagnosis, ADHD, depression, personality disorder, but without going to the root cause. So as I deteriorated in mental health and I developed a coping mechanism through addiction, and as I saw that they were not going to renew my contract, I decided to leave the profession completely and go into mental health and become counseling, guidance, and to study guidance and counseling. So basically, I'm now a wellness coach and also a counseling medical doctor. Yes.
So you have mentioned about trying to cope with the mental health challenges that you're going through addiction and other things. So how is that, especially in our today current age and in the society where people don't really understand how to deal with their challenges? How do you help people come to that space so that they can get to the root cause of their problems instead of getting into addictions or other coping mechanisms that are not the right mechanism?
Yeah, basically, I'm a trauma, like I said, I'm a trauma survivor, and I would love to build a trauma-informed society. Because a lot of the behavior you see in people is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the behavior you see is just a tenth of what's happening underneath. So the behavior in a person comes from an emotion. An emotion comes from a feeling, and a feeling comes from a thought process. And our thought processes come from our belief systems. And our belief systems, which are at the base, they come from past experiences, present experiences, and depending on whether they're pleasant or they're unpleasant, as in traumatic experiences, then you'll see the tip of the behavior. So you find that people can be very judgmental towards a behavior. For example, the coping mechanism of addiction. Addiction is to make yourself feel better, but why are you feeling bad? It's because of these past experiences. Plus, post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is ongoing trauma, for example, in childhood, which affects the development of the brain. And then you have like the big post-traumatic stress disorder, which are discrete. We call it simple. For example, you might have a bomb blast or something like that, or a terrorist attack. There's specific things which are symptoms which are associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, but complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which happens as a result of continuous psychological trauma in childhood when your brain is developing. It has the same symptoms as post-traumatic stress disorder, but with added complications of inability to regulate your emotions, to calm down, and relationship problems. Yes.
So there's one that is caused by just physical, that is more physical, and there's one that is more psychological.
They are both psychological, because trauma is defined as not what happens to you, but what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. So you might have two children from the same family exposed to the same traumatic experience, but the one who is more resilient will not be as affected as the one who is sensitive. Even in these things like bomb blast, if you think of Dusit, if you think of all these terrorist attacks, you might find some people who experience the same thing were not traumatized, and other people who experienced were extremely traumatized to the point of suicide.
Okay.
Yeah, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder is sometimes called childhood PTSD, CPTSD. So when the child is growing, then it has a permanent, it has effects, not permanent, but very severe effects on the brain development. Yeah.
Okay. Now that you have mentioned about childhood and that there's a way in which from childhood somebody is shaped towards how resilient they will become or how they become in their adulthood. And they say that nurture and nature form a big part of psychological development and the development of a child. So how can you define nurture, especially now that today we're talking about how nurture affects somebody's growing up?
Okay, so nature, we can say, is more to do with biology and genetics. So it's the way you're wired. And and then nature is more of the environment that the child grows up in. So the relationships and the surrounding environment. And there's a new study, what you call it, discipline which has come out, which is called epigenetics. So epigenetics shows how our genes interact with the environment. So they used to think that it was fixed. For example, that if you have the breast cancer gene, you will get breast cancer. But it has been found, yes, but it has been, if your mother had it, or your grandmother, but it has been found that our genes interact with the environment, and no two children are identical. It's Yes, even twins, yeah. But you can find very similar behavior. For example, even if you're not brought up with that particular parent, you might find that your mannerisms are the same. But the genes and the environment both interact. But nurture is extremely important because according to the Christian meta model of the human person, which has been backed up by philosophy, psychology, and theology, we are interpersonally relational. So we are affected by the environment. We are sensory, perceptive, perceptive, cognitive. So we definitely we have the five senses through which we perceive the environment, and then it affects us internally, and it affects our cognition. So when the interpersonal relationships are healthy, we develop normally. When they're unhealthy, we develop abnormally, and it manifests in that behavior.
Okay. So what is to develop normally? What would you say is to develop normally as a child now growing up?
Okay, we can't think of the child in isolation. The way God designed it is that parents are supposed to be the first teachers of their children, and every child deserves to be born into a loving home and welcomed by loving, healthy parents and raised by both parents for a minimum of 18 to 24 years. And there's the complementary, you cannot separate the relationship between the parents, which is marriage according to God's design. So the foundation of the natural family is marriage between a man and a woman. And we are supposed to be complementary. So the man represents half of humanity and the woman represents half of humanity. And for a child to grow healthily, we need to have access to both the masculine side of humanity and the feminine side of humanity. And they both of them represent God's nature. God is, as you know, he doesn't have a sex, but there's the feminine side and there's the masculine side, and the child needs to the father figure actually represents God in the relationship, because the order is God to God, a couple who is submitted to God. Then you have the father, then you have the mother submitting to the father, and the father loving the mother. And the child needs to see that interpersonal relationship. In an ideal family, there are no perfect families. And then the children are under the parents. And so that interaction between husband and wife is very much a part of it cannot be separated from the parenting. So when one parent is missing, the child is affected. Yeah. But the ways in which other parental figures can come into the picture, because we live in a community, when that thing of living in isolation is not supposed to be. It's not natural. So there are different parenting styles, and there are different outcomes of those parenting styles. And so these have been studied, the parenting styles, the toxic parenting styles, and the healthy parenting styles have been studied, and you can just observe the behavior of a child to know what kind of, whether they were parented healthily or not. So the parenting, or the parents are the first teachers, and the family of origin is the first school of life and the basic unit of society. So most of the problems you see in the society can be traced to dysfunction of families of origin.
Okay. So what you have mentioned very important things, very kind of an ideal setup of how a child, the setting that a child should be growing up. But as we know, really, it's very hard to kind of experience that ideal kind of setup. So,
Oh, there's such families, and I know them very well. Yes, yeah.
but then what in psychological terms, what core needs do having such an ideal family setup does a child get in that setup?
Okay, so you have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, yeah? So you have at the very bottom, you have the physiological needs: food, shelter, water, clothing, and then you after that you have the safety needs. So for a child to move for a person to move from one stage to the another, they first have to have met the needs of the lower one. Then you have safety needs, which is conservation of all the basic physiological needs. Then you have the love and belonging needs. And then you have, after that, you have the self-esteem needs. So that comes through accomplishment. Then you have the self-actualization. And then at the top, you have the transcendence, a need for meaning and purpose in life, a need for a relationship with your creator. So all these are supposed to be met within the family of origin, and the emotional needs are very important. So children have emotional needs, and that is the need to be loved, to be accepted and loved unconditionally. That's why I talked about being welcomed into a loving home by two healthy parents who know their roles. Yeah, there's things you get from your mom that you can't get from dad. So mother models femininity and mentors her daughter. The father models masculinity and mentors his son. So that is how it is supposed to be. You see, like even in medicine, they always used to tell us you first must know what is normal before we go to what is abnormal. Yeah, so if you immediately start with the abnormal, then you won't know what is missing. Yeah, I'm a single parent myself, so I'm not here condemning any single parent, and it's not the ideal situation at all, because you might have things that you'd like to mourn about with your spouse, and there are also things you'd like to celebrate, but there's no one to celebrate with. Yeah, so it's not that in fact, I have a lot of respect for people who are managing on their own. It's not easy. They say it's even lonelier than just being single. It's much lonelier to be a single parent than it is to be a single person without a child. Yeah.
So, you have mentioned about so how different is it, especially now that we are talking about now growing up in a children's home and somebody who has grown up in such a traditional, ideal kind of family. What happens to this child who has grown up in a children's home and one who has grown up in a normal, as you said, we need to know the normal family setup. What differences happens in their growth, mentally, psychologically, and all that?
Okay, so when a child is growing up in a home with both healthy parents and a healthy primary caregiver, then we have emotional needs. A child has two basic needs, and this has been extensively studied by Dr. Gabor. Yeah. So on the one hand, we have a need to be attached emotionally to our primary caregiver. And on the other hand, we have a need to be authentic. To be authentic means to be able to express our emotions. Yeah. So what happens, for example, if a child is born into, for a child that is newborn, um, he or she has needs. Yeah. When they get hungry, they cry. When they get lonely, they cry. When they get wet, they cry, isn't it? So all that time, the first 1.5 years of life, the child is is in a crisis of not trying to find out whether they can trust the world. So if every time the child cries, the primary caregiver responds to that need, then the child will overcome that crisis of the first 1.5 years. We call it attachment versus mistrust and distrust. So the child will develop an internal working model of themselves mirrored by the primary caregiver. The primary caregiver who keeps responding to their needs. I need a hug. There's the mothers who know whether it's a hug, whether the child is wet, whether they're hungry or thirsty.
They can differentiate the different cries.
Yeah. So the child gets the message, I matter. I am important. And I can trust the world. But if they don't respond, then the child gets the message, I don't matter. I can't trust anybody. And those first 1.5 years of life will show up in their relationships as adults because of the internal working model. And then the need to be authentic. So if the child is given a safe space to express their emotions, and the parent is emotionally stable enough to give what we call a safe space for the child to express those emotions, then they're able to be authentic. But you see, when you, for example, you're being raised by an unhealthy parent or an unhealthy caregiver, the child learns very quickly that if I am authentic, I will not get my needs met, my emotional needs met, because the parent becomes hostile. So they always choose to please the parent, and that is attachment trauma. They would rather please the parent by suppressing their emotions, and then they develop what we call attachment trauma, trying to attach to a parent who's not reciprocating. Now, what happens in a healthy home, in an unhealthy home, or in a children's home, is that the need for physical stimulation is not there, because the cry cannot always be answered to. Sometimes there's a shortage of staff. Sometimes these staff members are on shifts. These are people who are being paid. It's not out of love. And even if they are volunteers, they disappear. So the child develops an attachment to them, and then they go away. So the child, as a self-defense mechanism, decides, you know what, I'm not going to attach to anybody, because this person will go away. In the same way, like if you have a house help and you keep changing house helps and you're never there. Yeah, so the child needs the physical stimulation, the hugs, the touch. Studies have even shown that children will die without physical. It's as important as food, shelter, clothing, oxygen. Children need to be touched emotionally. They need to have that affection, the interpersonal relationship and attachment with the primary caregiver who is consistent. So yeah, it is the inconsistency and the changing of the people where the child, there are 4 attachment styles that develop according to whether a child has a healthy attachment with the primary caregiver. But it shows up in adulthood. Yes, because each stage of a child's development has there's a psychosocial need. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that it's kind of an interplay between what they need and how the need is met.
Yes.
And then now the child tries to form a mechanism on how to better handle the next time they have a need.
Yeah, because if you keep on not meeting my need, the child learns how to take care of their own needs.
And this happened as early as
the first 1.5 years. Yeah, we can't remember. We were too young. So it's very, very important to get the first 1.5 years right. But actually, trauma starts from the moment of conception. Yeah, so if, for example, if the lady realizes that she's pregnant and she tells her husband or her boyfriend, I'm pregnant, his response is enough to traumatize or bless the child. So if a man says, for example, how do I know it's mine? Yeah? Iyo ni yako. That's already trauma. It's a spirit of death on the child. Every single emotion the mother feels, the child also feels. So even by the time the child is born, they have either been traumatized or they have been blessed during the pregnancy. Yeah.
So there are instances where maybe a child starts very well in a very normal home, maybe even for the first 2-3 years, and then or even 5 years, and then the mother or the dad dies, and then maybe in that instance they are taken to a children's home. Does life, how they experience life in a children's home, can that alter how they had already developed, or what they had already developed in the first 5 years or 2 years be what will carry them through growing up?
Okay, so now you're talking about the adverse childhood experiences. The adverse childhood experience is a childhood trauma. And on the one hand, you have household dysfunction, and on the other hand, you have abuse and neglect. So abuse can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be sexual. Neglect can be physical and it can be emotional. So then the household dysfunction can be the absence of a parent, either through separation, divorce, death. It can be a mentally ill parent or an addicted parent, household member. It can be a jailed household member or domestic violence. So studies have shown that an adverse childhood experience score of 4 or more is severe childhood trauma. 4 or more is severe childhood trauma. No, 4 out of 10. They're 10. Yes, severe childhood trauma. But the one thing that can mitigate the effects, which can be behavioral, I guess we'll talk about that, physical illnesses, mental illnesses, risky behavioral and coping mechanisms. Actually, the effects can be mitigated by the presence of one emotionally healthy adult in the child's life. For example, a teacher, a neighbor who shows up for the child. Even an adverse childhood experience score of 10 can be mitigated by that. And the mental health of a child is directly proportional to the self-understanding of the primary caregiver, usually the parents. So, because children don't have a developed prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is the one that helps us have those higher functions of learning, understanding, and making decisions. So, the parent who stands in the gap is supposed to act as the prefrontal cortex of that child, which is helps them to regulate their emotions. When a child is feeling upset about anything, what we call dysregulated in medical terms, and the parent is healthy and holds the space for that child and allows them to feel that emotion until they come out of it and even name that emotion, the child will be much healthier than with a parent who himself doesn't even understand him or herself, and so tells the child, shut up. And so the child shuts down the emotions. What we have walking around in our society is people who are not in touch with their emotions. They have suppressed them for so long that they don't even know who they are. So the sense of self is not there. And so the intergenerational trauma continues. You see, you tell your son, mwanamume ni kuvumulia. Yeah? Then you expect the same son to be sensitive as a husband. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. If that was not modeled by the father figure. Yeah.
So the parent first or the caregiver has to fully understand themselves,
Yes.
understand the emotions, and then now be able to parent the child in a better way.
Yes. And understand the role of parenting. You know, the purpose of marriage is the good of the spouses, and on the one hand, and the procreation and education of children unto eternal life. We're actually custodians of these children. They're not ours. God wants them back. And so they will get to heaven if we build the character in them. And the way we build the character in them is by creating a conducive environment through our parenting skills. Yeah.
So but you have said that there is also a reality that it's possible for the adverse effects of the trauma that a child has gone through to be mitigated by having either one caregiver who is able to
Stand in the gap.
stand in a gap for the parents. So does that mean that for a child maybe who has been raised in a children's home, if they're able to find somebody who is responsible, somebody who understands them well, is able to mitigate any challenges that they might have?
Yes. But you see, like now, the first 7 years of life, it's like we have downloaded a lot of programs, even the value system of the family. And so a child who has, for example, you said a 3-year-old who goes to a children's home, who had a strong attachment.
Yes, for the parents.
Yes. Yeah, will be much better off than somebody who didn't get the attachment at 3 and now is trying to enter into a loving home. Yeah, the trauma in the one who didn't get it, the strong attachment and emotional support in the first 3 years of life will be much worse off than the one who spent their formative years with strong attachments and now is going to live in a home. But you see, each stage they still need attachment throughout their life. So it will affect them differently. The traumatic experiences in the home, because their brains are still not developing. You see, the 3-year-old who came from secure attachment in the home and now entering the children's home and finding that the primary caregivers are not there for him or her and not consistent, will definitely be affected, but not as badly as the one who didn't have a secure attachment in the formative years.
You've also said that that there's a book that I read. I just had a bit of the audio book of it that says it's called that the body keeps the score. So is that why, as much as we can't remember our formative years, the body, since we have the same body the whole time, it keeping the score is what now translates to different attachment styles now when it comes to adult relationships. How do those uh, different attachment styles manifest themselves in adulthood, adult relationships?
Okay, there are three basic unhealthy attachment styles and one healthy attachment style. So we always start with the normal, yeah? So the healthy attachment style, we talk about the attitude towards self and towards the partner. For example, in a romantic relationship, but it can also go for platonic relationships. But because it's going to really affect marriage when we talk about romantic relationships, the person who is securely attached has a positive attitude towards self and a positive attitude towards the partner. So they have healthy boundaries. Yes. Yeah. So they have, because the internal working model was, you are worthy.
Yes.
You whenever you had a need, it was met. Yeah. So that means I reinterpret that I am worthy. And so they're ready to give reciprocal love. And they expect reciprocal love. And when they meet somebody who is not loving towards them, it's very easy for them to walk away because they have very high self-esteem. Yeah, so I know that I deserve this kind of treatment. So they're not going to stay in an unhealthy relationship. Yeah. But they have healthy boundaries. Now the person with who didn't get their needs met, the three other attachment styles. We talked about the child who never got their needs met.
The one that is has a healthy view of themselves and others, that one is secure attachment. Okay.
Yeah. So then you have the person who is who never got their needs met and repeatedly never got their needs met and repeatedly had to sort themselves out and regulate their own emotions because they realize this caregiver is never coming to take care of my needs. So they develop a positive, in inverted commas, attitude towards themselves to meet their own needs and a negative attitude towards others. So they have a commitment phobia. They never want to be vulnerable to other people and they always want to be completely self-sufficient. That is very, very
It's called avoidant.
dismissive, avoidant. Yeah, just, yeah, you try and get close to them. Yeah, yeah. And that's how. And then you have the other one who has a negative attitude towards themselves and a positive attitude towards a partner. So this is the one that we call, is it anxious? Yeah, anxious attachment. So they feel very insecure. All of the three unhealthy attachment styles, insecure attachment styles, we call them, they all have a low self-esteem. So this one with an anxious attachment style has a low self-esteem, needs validation from the relationship. Yeah. And is just generally very clingy. Yeah. And insecure. and gets all their they gets all their worth from being in that relationship. And when there's no relationship, they collapse. You see that kind of thing. And then you have the anxious avoidant, who has a negative attitude to, yes, negative attitude towards self, negative attitude towards the partner. So they oscillate. Today I love you, tomorrow I hate you. Yeah, very, very confusing person. But they also have a very low self-esteem. They're very terrified of abandonment, and so they're all insecure, but they manifest like that. Yeah. So, but then the funny thing is that the anxious types will always be attracted to the dismissive types.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. So you spend your life chasing. You're always chasing after this person. And the dismissive one is always running away. They're enjoying the attention, but they always shut down when they feel that you're getting too close. So I think my style was dismissive avoidant, a combination of the two, very fearful of abandonment. And sometimes I would be very loving, sometimes running away. Yeah.
And this is because, let's say for the one who is anxious, is the parent was kind of an avoidant, so they always sought to get attached, but the parent was
Attachment trauma. Yeah, attachment trauma is when you're trying to attach to a parent, because you know the four main parenting styles is the responsiveness and love that you show to the child on one hand, and the expectation demandingness that you show on the other. So in a healthy family, there's a healthy balance between the responsiveness to the child and the demandingness. So I expect you to get to have good behavior. I expect you to give these grades in school, but I listen to you. As a parent, I listen to your opinion. We make decisions together, and when you mess up, mistakes are allowed. And there are consequences, but they're not punitive consequences. They're actually just the natural consequences. For example, if you break that window while playing football, then we shall use your pocket money to pay for it. Yes. I don't start smashing you upside your head. Yeah. Then the other unhealthy parenting styles, that's now the democratic authoritative parenting style. In the authoritarian parenting style, the responsiveness and love to the child is way down here, but the demandingness is up here. We call that authoritarian or military parenting. Yeah. So the child doesn't.
most
Yeah.
African parents.
Most of the African parents feel like that. So they don't listen to the child. It is my way or the highway. What other things do they say in Africa? Yeah, many other things. We always have cartoons about the African parent, and then very severe punishment for any mistake. So these children have a very low self-esteem. It might manifest in the form of being a bully, because when they find children who are weaker than them, they do the same thing, or just very generally low self-esteem, socially not capable of making healthy relationships. Then you do expect a child to have an attachment trauma. Yeah. So these ones, the ones who come from the authoritative, they're very good socially. They do very well academically. They're able to regulate their emotions. What else? They're the ones who are being sought after by bosses. Very much they're able to work without supervision. Yeah, because the parents respected them, gave them their freedom. Yeah. So then you have now the opposite of the authoritarian parenting style, which is permissive. So the parent is very responsive to the child.
So they love it so much.
Love in inverted commas, because it's a form of neglect when you don't teach your children values and expectations. The expectations are way down here. It's okay, you can do what you like, too much freedom, no boundaries, no consequences. It's a form of neglect. These children actually feel neglected because children feel safe when there are boundaries and consequences. We eat at this time, there's structure in the home. Yeah, so there's no structure. So they basically have a very high sense of entitlement. Some people say it's the Gen Zs of today, but it's not all the Gen Zs of today. You tell somebody why, what are they saying? Somebody came with the wrong shoes to work. And then he said, Kwani, do I type with my feet? That kind of response. Yeah. Yeah. They come anytime they want. They ghost the employer. You've never seen actually anything like this generation. But it's not all of them. Yeah. So this permissive parenting, and sometimes it's a response to authoritarian parenting. So you find the Gen Xers who grew up with authoritarian parenting, now they went to the other extreme. And so now they're paying for it, because they have a sense of entitlement, very, very, what they call the spoiled brat. They're very rude. They're not used to consequences, but asiyefundishwa na mamake atafundishwa na ulimwengu. So they find the world out there very hostile. Then you have the neglectful parenting style. Neglectful parenting style is the parent neither has responsiveness to the child, doesn't show them love, and also has no expectations. The parent is either always at work or all the electronic devices. And so we call the neglectful parenting style and the permissive parenting style, we call it the so-called modern parenting styles. And this one has, because of having no love, they actually do very badly in all the domains of health. Yeah, so they get into drugs and all that. Even the other three unhealthy parenting styles. Then you have some additional ones which they have said helicopter parenting style. So the parent doesn't let the child develop their own ability to make decisions. Yeah, so they're always hovering. Yeah. Yes, and do you have many modern parents? Yeah. So the child doesn't develop self-esteem. This might be one of the permissive types. But now they've added the fact that they never let the child make their own decisions. The helicopter parenting style. Yeah.
As you say, all these different kind of parenting styles, I don't know. At times I say that our parents didn't know any better. They maybe saw how their parents did it, and some out of maybe fear, that's why maybe they doing the helicopter, or they're being very harsh. But then how do you find a balance in all that, so that your child has freedom, they have responsibility to do some things, but then there are things that they can't do. How do you balance that?
That's exactly the healthy parenting, authoritative parenting that I talked about. That you actually, in this healthy family, mistakes are allowed, and but there are also consequences for actions, and parents are very clear about their. Let me give an example. For example, you're living in Nairobi, you're living in Mombasa, and the whole family is going to move to Nairobi. In an authoritative family, the parents will sit down with the children and say, they've already made the decision, but they will sit down with the children and say, we want to go to Nairobi because your dad has a better job there. But how do you feel about it? And of course, there will be a lot of emotions. They've made friends in the neighborhood, the schools, whatever. So what would you like us to do? Let's hold a party, or we go and visit so and so and all. But you see, they've involved the children.
Yes.
Yeah. Then also you talked about the window, which was broken when they were playing football. Yes. Yeah. It wasn't on purpose, so you'll pay for it. Now, in an authoritarian home, the children will just be told, tunaenda, tunahama on Monday. Our way or the highway. No conversation, nothing. And if the window is broken, you probably break a bone or two of the child instead of talking to the child. Yeah? Beaten, yeah? So the child, it's a fear-based parenting. This one is a love-based parenting. In a permissive home, they will even ask the children for permission to move. So the children become now the authority in the home. No, it's not supposed to be like that. So do we move or not? What do you think about it, baby? That kind of thing. No. You are the authority in the home. The neglectful one will probably just move, and also very neglectful. Yeah, and so yeah, with having that balance, we expect you to do well in school. We expect you to work hard. If you don't, if you come home after curfew, then you will not go for the outing next time. So there are consequences for actions, but not necessarily corporal punishment. I've seen healthy people come out healthily who have never been beaten. Yeah, so it's not that it's a must that you must hit you. It's actually the relationship, because when parents are connected emotionally with their children, then they're able to correct. But when children are disconnected from their parents and you try to correct, it's not going to work. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think discipline is one of a key aspect or part of parenting. And we've mentioned about the children don't have to be beaten. So growing up, okay, being part of the Gen Zs, I think beating was the only way of being punished. And nowadays, you hear that there's a new way of punishing where you are told to look at the wall and think about your actions. Sometimes that feels very traumatic. Is there, maybe you can just speak a bit more about the whole question of discipline, especially let's say for a child who doesn't even understand. Like, is there a level of, let's say, like if we are talking about beating, is there a level that is too much and there's little, or is it what happens before the beating or after and all that? Or is it the beating is not even necessary at all?
Okay, I always like to think of the child as both the building and the builder. Yeah. So the child is, just try to imagine a house with a roof, a ceiling, walls, a floor, and a foundation. God, when He designed this child, He had a particular blueprint in His mind of what the perfect version of this child would be like. Yeah. So He said Isaac would be like this, the perfect version of it, and completely different from anything else. So the child is trying to build a house and is also the house itself. And we talk about the character. Yeah. Now, in order for this child to build the house, they need the ingredients from the caregivers, the parents. Yeah. The foundation of this house is always going to be unconditional acceptance. We call it the 6 A's of parenting. So unconditional acceptance of the child the way they are, not because of what they do. Yeah. So you find that there's a very big problem with a lot of parents who give conditional love. So not affection just because you are who you are, but because you've gotten good marks or you look pretty or you're handsome, that kind of thing. No, the child needs to know that they're accepted unconditionally. Not that maybe like in many African homes, the first child, the father usually wants a boy, and then a baby girl is born, you see. So you always show the girl that you wish kind of that she was a boy. So unconditional acceptance of the child, that's when they get secure. Then you have appreciation as the floorboards. So every time a child comes to you, they are getting their emotional needs met. It's like you've given them the building blocks to go and build. Every time they come to you and you don't give them what they need, that part is missing. Or when you're abusive verbally or emotionally, something is broken. Yeah, so there's breakage and there's missing parts. Actually, they say neglect is much more dangerous when the child comes and you're not there. So then you have those floorboards, which are the appreciation of the child. Yeah. So just appreciating the child for who they are. They always feel that you appreciate them. And then you have the walls of the building, and this is the affection. Affection. Have you heard of the 5 love languages?
Yes.
Yeah, this is very common now. Yeah. So every child has a love language. And it's very easy for you to find out if you're close to your child what their love language is.
At what age do you start realizing?
At what age? When they start crawling, when they start walking, you'll find like my granddaughter is always touching her father's ears like this. So that one is physical touch, you see? Then a child will bring you a flower from outside. That is gifts. Yeah, gifts don't have to be expensive, yeah? So mommy, here's this flower, then you know that is a language. But then all of them have this one love language in common, and that is quality time. So quality time, words of affirmation, which is very much the same as appreciation. You say, try to catch your child doing the right thing. Don't always look for them. Well, they're making a mistake. Oh, you washed those dishes so well. Yeah. Or you try to catch them doing the right thing. Appreciate words of affirmation. Then there's acts of service. So your child is doing their homework, or when you see them struggling to do something, come in and help them to do it. Another very big problem with parents is expecting a child to have a skill, yet they didn't teach them that skill. And then you beat them for not having the skill. So be very patient, whether it's tying the shoelaces, preparing their clothes for tomorrow. Instead of screaming in the morning like a headless chicken, teach them how to set them up for success. Teach them how to prepare their clothes the previous day. Yeah. Teach them how to do the chores in the house. And when they don't do it well, continue to encourage them. So then you have the 5 love language. Have I said all of them? Words of encouragement.
Words of affirmation. There's quality time.
Yes.
There's gifts. There's physical touch. And there's acts of service.
Acts of service, yeah. So try to have dinner with your children. In fact, some people say that is the best decision you can ever make. Look at your child in the eye without a device, without phones. If possible, have an electronic table. And there should be no electronics. Children do not need mobile phones. If you need to get in touch with them.
Today they will crucify you.
That is now parents suffering from peer pressure. Yeah. Because when you're very close to your child, you should be the first school of life. And access to internet for a brain which is not developed is very dangerous. In fact, I always tell people, like now, just imagine the scenario when there's a man outside your gate knocking.
Yes.
And he tells you, go and open the door. And you've never seen him before. And he tells you, I want to go to your daughter's bedroom. And you say, okay, just show him the bedroom. Imagine there's no difference. Your unsupervised access to the internet in a room, yes, these are the parents, because there's no parenting gap. So the minute you're not parenting your child, whoever is the child is having access to is the parent. And there are many pedophiles online who are pretending to be 15-year-old boys or girls and who are befriending the children. That's a topic for another day, but it's a very serious one. There's also pornography, which is destroying our children. And there's all these foreign ideologies, like transgenderism. You can be trapped in the wrong body. So all the people who bring their children to me who are in the LGBTQ ideologies, most of them had access to unsupervised access to the internet. Yeah. So yeah, that's a very long topic. But we go to the 5 love languages. Then the windows and the doors, that is your availability. Parents need to be available. So at least have that one meal with your child. If not every day, once a week. But 10 minutes per day per child. Yeah, minimum. One-on-one conversation. Eyeball to eyeball. Yeah. How was your day? And what happened? And okay, so then a follow-up. Last week you told me about this friend who was not feeling well. How are they today? And that kind of thing. Now, this is what we call the love part of the building. Then you have the ceiling, which is accountability. You've given all this love, we talk about the expectations. Parents need to be accountable to children, and children need to be accountable to parents. If you're going to tell your children not to drink alcohol, for example, you cannot be preaching water and drinking wine. Yep.
That also means that
Yes, you need to set an example.
they have to say their sorries. Something that is very hard from our parents.
You need to set the example. You need to model good behavior. So the best teacher for children is actually not only your words, that one counts for little, but your example. The way you treat your wife and the way the wife treats the husband is modeling for them the future of their interpersonal relationships. If the husband is abusive, The child you've modeled to your daughter, this is the kind of man they're going to date. And the boys are learning, okay, and the other way around, if the mother is disrespectful, the girls are going to model that kind of behavior, you see? So then we have the accountability. So parents need to be accountable to their children. If you have made a promise, please keep it. Childhood is very short, and children always remember. So daddy keeps his promises. Daddy always is sober. Daddy pays for the bills, yeah, and mommy helps around the house. Whatever he works for your family, yeah, the chores around the house.
It's the consistency.
Yes, yeah.
You want the actions.
You have the primary roles and you have the secondary roles. The primary roles cannot be abdicated. For example, the fact that women can nurture life in their womb and breastfeed can never be given to you. And the fact that number one role of men is to protect. Proverbs 31, wife can also provide.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I always start with protection and also provision. And the man is actually supposed, that protection role of his, he cannot do without the support of his wife through the respect that she shows. It's like holding up an umbrella. An umbrella cannot work unless it's held up. So wives need to uphold their husbands in order for him to perform the role of protection. So now the accountability. Then you have the authority of the parents over the children under the authority of God. So the man is supposed to submit to God, and the woman is supposed to submit to a husband who is submitted to God, isn't it? Then the biggest problem is now when you try to exert your authority and your accountability without these other things in place. The whole building just collapses. And that's happening in most families. So without your connectivity to the child, the most important thing is connectivity. That is why you find that it's very hard to answer those questions about spanking and beating. Yeah? Because if it had started from a very early age, the relationship is the most important thing. You will find that you never have to hit and you never have to scream because they've always known daddy loves me. And even that voice of dad is enough. I have said, you know. Yeah, fathers give structure and they give the obedience and all that. And also men know how to play with children. You know the rough and tumble play. I've asked women, if you want to know you're different from a man, try throwing your baby and catching it. We're not designed for that. And that is very important for the child's development. Children who have not been played roughly with the father, they don't know, they're not what we call proprioception. They're not comfortable in their own skin because they've never had the limits tested, you know. The father, I'm sure, do you have a child? Yes. Yes, you see, it's in your DNA. And then the child is learning I can trust daddy because when I'm thrown, I'm caught. All those are very important for development. So women should not try to be fathers or pretend to be fathers. At least try to find a father figure, yeah, for the child.
Lots of wisdom and information there. But I think one thing that I've picked that shapes how a child grows up, and it's a different parenting, is the ability to love and to accept love,
Yes.
and also how able they are. I think it's maturity, well, how they're able to manage their own emotions and know when to act or when not to act.
Yeah, because managing your emotions depends on the presence of an emotionally stable adult. Because they will act as the prefrontal. The prefrontal cortex is what helps us to regulate our emotions. So when a child is dysregulated and upset, the presence of a emotionally stable adult is very necessary for the child to regulate themselves. Telling them to go away and stand in the corner is not very good. It's not very good because the child needs you to hold that space and say, let's name this emotion. Why are you feeling like this? It's because listen, my dog died. Or, the child is going through grief or they were bullied in school. I'm feeling sad. We never grew up with these words. We just knew I'm feeling bad. Then I'm feeling angry. Why are you feeling angry? Yeah, so let the child feel. Then actually, emotions are not wrong or right. Let the child name the emotion. You validate the emotion. Yes, we're feeling like this. And yeah, I've seen a parent actually doing that with a 2-year-old. Yeah, you name the emotion, and the child, once you've named it and validated and say, yes, I recognize you, I see you, I hear you. Most people just want those three things: to be seen, to be heard, to be known, to be understood. Once you valid to be seen, to be known, to be understood and loved and conditioned. So once the child, they will come out of that emotion much faster than when you tell them, nende ujisort urudi kama sura iko sawa.
Actually, when you cry, you're beaten to stop crying.
Let me give you a reason to cry. Now that you're crying for no reason, what amekupea reason? Yes, so, but you see, I don't blame parents, because the two most important skills in life, to be a spouse and to be a parent, ni kuangukia, is no course. But now people and organizations like my organization, we're being very deliberate with parenting coaching, premarital counseling, marital counseling. So I don't think it should be a matter of kuangukia anymore. But we love our parents very much. They did the best with what they knew how. But through their mistakes, it has helped us realize how important intentional and deliberate parenting is. Knowing that every interaction you have with your child will be remembered forever. You will forget how you promised to take your children swimming. But why promise? If you knew it's not, yeah. So we need to be very, very intentional, because the children will remember forever what we have forgotten. Yeah.
You have mentioned about what you do and helping people to be intentional in their parenting. Because I think as you have been speaking, I just see how that needs a lot of work. So that for most of us, most of a bigger percentage have not been experienced that kind of parenting. So that for them to reciprocate it to their children will need a lot of intentionality and a lot of work to be able to then change how they. I mean, we never mentioned how we were feeling growing up, or even do those things that you are mentioning. So how do you, and somebody who has been parented in that way, how do you change your mindset, maybe attachment style and all that, to become a secure person and to even become a better parent?
Yeah. Like I said, the studies have shown that the presence of one emotionally available, mature adult was enough to mitigate all the adverse effects that I expected. Yeah, the trauma, yeah. And that emotionally stable adult may actually be in the form of a counselor. So in trauma healing, we can never heal on our own. Even if you get all the best YouTube videos or the best books or whatever, we are interpersonally relational. So we heal through interpersonal relationships. Yeah, so the child can be guided out of that trauma. If they want to be healed, they need to find that mentor, that person who is there for them, who shows up for them. And that can actually help them to regulate their emotions. That is the whole purpose of counseling, is the relationship with a healthy counselor. Not all counselors are healthy, and that is why we need to have a very high level of self-awareness ourselves. I need to realize when I'm not able to help somebody, either because that client is triggering me, because if I haven't dealt with my loss and grief, for example, and I'm dealing with somebody who is bereaved, I won't be able to help them. So we need to have a very high level of self-awareness, and we also have subspecializations, so that I know, oh, this person is the best for loss and grief. This is the best person for post-abortion trauma. That is the best person for family counseling. That is the best person for child, for healing a child. But every time we receive a child, at least in my in the Christian meta model of the human person, whatever age you come to me, a parent brings a child to me, I always get a parenting agreement with the parents. Because usually children who manifest abnormal behavior, what we call abnormal behavior, the child is communicating something. And so it's usually something from home. So I would tend to ask, what is your marriage like? And how is that spilling out into your parenting? So definitely the children are a manifestation of what's happening at home. So we always sign parenting agreements with it, even if your child is an adult. I usually sign parenting agreements. The times when I've not done that, I've always regretted. So when you're counseling, you need to see the person as a whole and living in an environment, they come from a family. So you can't treat the person in isolation. Yeah, because even if they respond to your counseling, they're going back to the same toxicity. So you need to help the parents in a non-judgmental way, because parents are dealing with a lot. Like now there's a lot of economic insecurity. So parents who are not happy, parents who are stressed, are not able to parent properly. So we need to help the parent try to overcome this, be more self-aware, and realize that their stress is spilling over into the child. Yeah. And also how you yourself, there's something we call reparenting yourself. Yes. There's even videos on YouTube that you can watch with the help of your therapist. And so you go back to your childhood and help yourself reparent yourself. It's called reparenting the inner child. Because even if I see you, if I see him, I see myself, there's a child in all of us. So there's this big body, 6'5" man, but there's a child in him. And if that child is not healed, it's going to manifest. So recognize that there's an inner child in everybody, and that inner child has a need that different people have different extents to which the inner child within them was not parented well. And not all parents will apologize. I apologized to my children, but it's very, very rare. So, and some parents are dead. They've passed on. So the best thing to do is to learn how to reparent yourself, be there for yourself at every stage of development. If you can recognize and embrace yourself, we call it mindful self-compassion. So we guide these people to back into mindful self-compassion, understanding that the way you are and the mistakes that you made could have been related to the way you were parented. Now you're going to be responsible, but forgive yourself, because we make a lot of mistakes in our coping mechanisms. Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody said that the reason why just thought about why you have to forgive yourself is because what your younger self was doing was actually a good thing to protect itself from what was happening around them. Wow. So another thing that is part of healing and just trying to come to a better society is, how do we let's say you have a partner who has a problem from their childhood, or maybe a friend and all that. How do you deal with them? How do you is it good to go trying to, okay, it's not, I don't think it's a very good thing to be analyzing people. Okay, those ones are avoidant, those ones are anxious, but how do you well deal with such people? Maybe they're in your close environments.
You mean in marriage?
We've been married,
Yeah.
been friendship.
Yeah. In fact, I need to talk about there's something that's an epidemic, and it's a so-called human magnet syndrome. And Dr. Ross Rosenberg has done a lot of research on that. And he finds that people from, we actually, even Dr. Gabor has written about it. He says that we are attracted to people who are at the same level of wounding as us. Yes. So we find, for example, there's something there's a word people throw around a lot, which is narcissist. Narcissistic personality disorder, attracting somebody with codependency. Codependency, the word has been changed now. It has been diagnosed as a self-love deficit disorder, SLDD. So an SLDD will be attracted to somebody with a narcissistic personality disorder. Both of you came from dysfunctional families, but you internalized your pain differently. So the definition of somebody with a self-love deficit disorder is that they will stay in a relationship where they give love, respect, and care. They do not receive love, respect, and care, yet they stay in the relationship. So they're all about give, give, give. And the narcissistic personality is all about take, take, take. And they just attract one another like a magnet. That's why I'm so particular about trauma healing before marriage, so that you can get a healed, healthy attachment style and have healthy boundaries. Because that is why, in fact, self-love deficit is much more respectful. Is somebody who, as a coping mechanism, we talked about how you suppressed all your emotions. And one of the trauma responses, there are 4 trauma responses, is there's a fight, then there's being aggressive, and there's flight, which is running away. Then there's fawning, people pleasing. And then there's what is it called? There's fight, flight, and then the other F is disassociation. Yeah, I'm trying to get the F word for it. Fight, freeze. So it's a defense mechanism. So you get brain fog. Yeah, you get brain fog. You just numb. Yeah, you procrastinate, that kind of thing. So the fauna is the one who is the people pleaser. And then, so the person with the narcissistic personality disorder is attracted by this person with a low self-esteem and is very manipulative. And there's a lot of things that happen in the relationship: gaslighting, removal of the people that love you. So there's so many red flags. Yeah, they don't want you to be in touch with the people that love you, so that they can have all the access to you to abuse you. And they're very, very charming in the beginning, and they tend to love bomb. So yeah, so we need to talk about how to heal. The best thing to heal is just, yes. They say that the best way to deal, it's first of all very unfortunate to be married to somebody with a narcissistic personality disorder. The people with narcissistic traits, it doesn't mean that you have the full blown narcissistic personality disorder. But they talk about the deep technique. For example, we need to have healthy boundaries. And the reason why you got into that relationship in the first place is that you didn't have boundaries. You accepted to be mistreated. So they talk about the deep technique, which is don't engage, don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, and don't personalize. Because this person is going in, the reason why you have so many upheavals in the relationship is that they're always manipulating you psychologically. So once you up your game and you realize this person is just trying to trigger me into a fight, then you start putting boundaries and refusing to be affected by their behavior, by personalization, not struggling to explain yourself and that kind of thing. But it needs a lot of prayer, because people with narcissistic personality disorder do not have self-awareness. They don't go for therapy. And even if they go for therapy, they don't follow instructions. Very low. And you can't actually perform therapy on somebody who feels that
They're okay.
they're okay, and it's everybody else's fault. So the best thing is not to get into a relationship in the first place. It can also be a platonic relationship. And so they like to exert control over everybody. And because they're so charming, in the beginning, they do very well in interviews. A lot of the people causing misery in offices have that. So you just need to be able to do your work, block yourself from the toxicity of this person. But that is a topic which can go on for 3 hours. The narcissist, I'm not an expert in narcissism, but there's Dr. Ramani, there's Dr. Ross Rosenberg. They have very good videos on how to handle. And if this person it's actually an addiction. The person with the self-love deficit disorder has an addiction to people pleasing. So the therapy cannot be done in 10 sessions. It can even take 1.5 years or more, because now anybody with an addiction needs a minimum of 1 year for you to get them out of the addiction, to start forming healthy boundaries and that kind of thing, and loving them, self-love. So they move from self-love deficit disorder to self-love abundance, hopefully. But it's very painful because the narcissist reacts. And it's very, very unpleasant because they always get sucked back into the people pleasing. So every time they relapse, then you have to think about what happened, how did you relapse, how can we make it different, or just how to leave the relationship for your own sanity. Yeah. If you're in an abusive relationship, there's no need of staying there. Yeah.
That's very. I think it's a reality that we see in the world today. But something else, when you started, you mentioned that it's a word that is being thrown all over the place. How do we get to a point where we rightly diagnose and not just dismiss everyone as narcissistic? Because I think that's something that I have also noticed, that if you don't agree with somebody, you say they're narcissistic, and all that. And also, in addition to that, there's a trend whereby, okay, it's coming with the Gen Zs most of the time, where they often say that they have narcissistic bosses or the work environment is toxic and all that. And yet we didn't see this in the earlier generations. Is it that they are overstating it, or is it that they are self-aware, or is it that the earlier generations were not aware of these things and that now this generation is more aware of? Yes,
I think it's a combination of both, because we didn't know what narcissistic personality disorder was. But when I think about my childhood and some of the bosses that I've had, for sure there was narcissism, yeah? But we didn't have a name for it. And we grew up with so many self-love deficit narcissistic relationships. You were surrounded by all those relationships. But now that there's more awareness, they're diagnosing it more. But like I said, for you to diagnose self-love deficit, they're giving love, respect, care. And they're not receiving love, respect, care, and they're still in the relationship. For the narcissistic traits, we just say that they're narcissistic traits. And there's the different types of narcissistic personality disorders. There's the overt one, who is obviously bellicose, very show-offy and all that. That one is very easy to tell. But there's also the covert narcissist. The covert narcissist is actually very dangerous because they look very nice, they look very humble, but they have a lot of self-pity. And when it comes out later in the marriage, it's very, very toxic. So toxic, the word toxic is used because of the word toxic stress. You have 3 types of stress. You have good stress and bad stress. So, but depending on why you're calling somebody toxic, it's important to know why you're calling them toxic. If you're calling them toxic because they're asking you why you didn't come to work on Monday without calling, it's you who is toxic. Yeah. So it's very important to know about the narcissistic traits. Somebody might be just very self-centered. Yeah. Very selfish, or from this permissive family. And they're not actually full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, but they're displaying narcissistic traits, or that's all about me, myself, and I. Yeah, but not necessary. And it's better for a mental health professional to actually diagnose the full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. Although now everybody is calling everybody they don't like a narcissist. Yeah, so it's good to get a professional opinion. But the self-love deficit is very obvious. You're in a relationship that is toxic, you're not getting your needs met, and you're still there. Definitely you do not love yourself enough, and you need to be helped into self-love abundance, and they respond to therapy because they have self-awareness. Yeah.
Wow. So part of what you've said, to be able to break that cycle of neglect and that self-love deficit, is actually to do therapy and even get to a point where you're able to parent your younger self, to deal with that.
And also the narcissistic personality disorder, like I said, they don't respond well to therapy. But what I've seen working is rock bottom. When God works on them, to the point that they lose everything and they hit rock bottom, and the only way is up, and they decide to humble themselves and accept they accept the Creator into their lives and accept help. So we don't wish that on anybody, but that is what I've seen working. Yeah.
Amazing. Are there success stories or case studies where somebody has had that challenge and then they have turned out to be better people in terms of they were not nurtured well and they have turned out to be better parents?
Yeah. Like I said, when you go through therapy and you realize the mistakes your parents made and that you're making them on your children, or you get the self-awareness that I never want to do the same thing to my children. Because just like the manifestation of behavior is the tip of the iceberg. Because once the whole idea of therapy is to make the unconscious conscious. So once somebody is able to look at the whole iceberg and say, so this is why I behave like this. It's all related to my childhood. In fact, whenever somebody comes, you just ask them, what is the earliest memory? Or you ask them to draw a picture of their 5-year-old self and what's going on. Where's dad? Where's mom? Where's the kitchen? What's going on? They're able to go back. You're able to get a snapshot of what their childhood was like. And then from there, you can build up on it. Because whatever is manifesting in the present is evidence of what is happening, what happened long time ago when you lost yourself by suppressing your emotions because of wanting to be attached to your primary caregiver. So you lost your authenticity. So now the healing comes when your authenticity comes back and you're able to say, this is how I'm feeling. Be in touch with your emotions, with your body, understand, self-understanding, and then you come to define your divine purpose from there.
Wow. What about I think that's a very good solution, and I think it's very important that people are able to process that and understand why they behave the way they do. But there's also the reality of and studies have shown that it's very possible to replicate what you 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 had how your childhood was,
Yes.
to replicate it to your yes, unconsciously to your children, or even because of the deficits in your upbringing, you end up with a partner who has the same character traits. So how do you what would be your advice to such people who are afraid that they might replicate that to their children?
Oh, it's about conscious parenting. Yeah. So we actually talk about the parenting styles and how it plays out in real life. For example, if you have children and you're having parenting challenges, so why don't you try this instead? Because you're yelling and you're screaming every morning. How about if you empower your child the night before? How, to avoid all this stress of screaming at your child every day, beating them every day, feeling bad about yourself, why don't you spend more time with them so that you're building the connection and also setting them up for success rather than waiting for them to make a mistake and then you punish? Yeah, so there's so many ways in which we can give the concrete examples how to motivate the child. For example, the modeling, for example, modeling a positive mindset, a growth mindset. You don't praise a child for being clever, for example. You praise a child for the effort.
Oh,
Yeah.
the difference.
Yes, this is a very big difference. Studies have shown that when you praise a child for being clever, they're so terrified of not being clever that they won't take on new challenges. They just want to maintain the status quo. But when you praise a child for effort, they feel so motivated to take even the hardest projects because you're motivating them about the effort that they took.
They need to be seen and what they're doing.
Yes, to appreciate the effort that they're doing, and then just encouraging. In fact, I have an acronym here for parent. P stands for personal friend. A stands for available. R stands for responsible. E is encouraging. N is nurturing. T is trustworthy. So if you have that acronym for parent always in this particular moment, am I being a personal friend? Am I being available? Am I nurturing? Am I responsible? Yeah, am I trustworthy? So it just completely, in fact, one of the best ways God allows us to go through the toxic parenting so that you can say, this is something I will never do. And then also look at the parents who are practicing the 6 A's of positive parenting and form a networking groups, because people heal in what do we call it, in groups. So when we're all trying to solve a common problem, like we form a parenting groups and say, oh, you mean I thought I was alone? Yeah, because yesterday I screamed like a person from Mathare, at the top of my voice, and I'm feeling so bad because my child is so down. Oh, you mean another mother also did the same thing? Yeah. So you realize that you're not alone in your mistakes. And then they tell you what works for them. Not everything works. You don't copy paste. Yeah, because every family is different and every child is completely different. A sensitive child, like I was, is very different from a resilient child. So the way you correct a resilient child is not the same way you correct the sensitive one, because the sensitive one will break into 1,000 pieces, but the other one, will take in much more. So then getting to know your child is very important. And also you'll be able to get to know the careers that they will do. For example, I always used to be anything psychological, any magazine, any article on psychology. If somebody had observed me, they'd say this one is going to be a psychologist. But because you pass all the sciences, you say, how can you waste the sciences? Nenda fanye medicine, you see. So that's how it happens. So it's good to know your child so that you're able to also guide them into the right career. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. As we come to a close, what is the place of faith in the whole journey towards healing and therapy?
Yeah.
Yes, because I think you can find Christian counselors and therapists, and there's just pagan or other maybe religion. Is there a difference in that?
Yeah, there's a huge difference. I was not always a Christian. So according to the Christian meta model of the human person, it applies to every single human being. But we don't impose our religion on people. We have to internalize the values of the Christian meta model. The 11 premises. So we're created by God in his image and likeness, and that's where our dignity comes from. Whether you're Muslim, atheist, or anything, then we are fallen. So this is why we have so much evil in the world. And that is why we need therapy, because bad things happen to us and bad things were done to us, and we also did bad things. Then we also have the hope of redemption through Christ. So God loves us unconditionally, and he's ready to take us back no matter what we have done. Created, fallen, and redeemed. Then how do we thrive? The human nature actually has shown, studies have shown that human beings thrive in virtue. So when we practice character strength, I'm a character coach myself. And so when I try to think of my younger self and what I didn't have at that time and why I made the terrible choices that I did, is because I didn't have character. The most important being emotional intelligence, because the emotional intelligence has 6 parts. It has self-awareness, it has self-regulation, self-discipline. Under self-discipline, you have chastity, which is integration of your sexuality within the person. Then we have under self-discipline, you also have personal integrity. Then you have the leadership qualities, which can be servant leadership, strategic leadership, and mentorship. Then you have social intelligence. Under social intelligence, you have empathy, compassion, and then you have the articulation of purpose, which comes under self-awareness. So somebody who's practicing emotional intelligence articulation of purpose, we said that's the transcendence. We get completely fulfilled when we are living in our purpose and serving humanity, whether you're atheist or whatever religion you are. When you're serving humanity through your gifting, but if you're a Christian and you're serving humanity because of your love of God, it adds an extra dimension. So you're giving glory to God through your work. So we thrive when we practice character. Then we also thrive in vocation. So everybody has a vocation. For example, as a woman, you may be a wife, which means you're created to be a helper. Then you're also a sibling, you're a sister. So there's the sisterhood. Then there's you're a daughter of somebody. Then you are you're performing, you're giving glory to God in your gifting. That is now your queenship. We call those the 4 pillars. Then so your vocation as a wife, as a mother, is extremely important, because your vocation as a mother started with a vocation as a wife. And you are created to be a helper to this man, not to stress him, yeah? And you are actually under him by nature. But if unfortunately what happens is, if a man doesn't fulfill his protective role, then the woman is thrown into her masculine energy. And you have what we call married single. So the man is there, yes, but he's not providing, he's not protecting. So it's very difficult for a woman to be feminine when she also has to be protecting the family and providing for the family. Yeah, so yeah, then the husband has his role as a protector, as a provider, as a husband, and he's the one who's supposed to be the moral head of the home. You know, Adam is the one who was given the law, and he allowed Eve to be tempted. So that is where that's why God came back to him. He didn't go to Eve. He said, you are the one who is at fault because he didn't protect her. So he's the moral custodian of the home. So we thrive in our vocations. So when a man is reaching 35 and he doesn't have a steady job because he was created to work, and he doesn't have a wife and yet he wants to be married, then there's a crisis. That's why we're having so many suicides with men, because the women are not submissive, then they're not getting the jobs. And so there's an existential crisis in men because they were created to work and provide and protect, and it's not happening. So then we are interpersonally relational. We need other people. What was the other premise? We are made of, okay, I'm a spirit. Then I have a soul, which consists of my mind. We're thinkers. We're rational thinkers. My emotions and my free will. So have I said 11? I don't know. So then we're sensory, perceptual, cognitive. So we are very much affected by the environment. I think we've talked about that. So our cognitions is affected by the environment. And then we are a personal unity. So I cannot separate my sexuality, the fact that I'm a woman, and how I serve God. So I really need to be able to serve God in my femininity. So each and every person on earth has a God-shaped hole. If God is not in that hole, you will fill with other things, usually addictions. And so we need to remember that there's also the evil one. So we talk about the kingdom mindset. And if a girl is coming to me and she's sleeping around, the sexual revolution ideology and that radical feminism, anything a man can do, a woman can do also. I should be able to recognize that this is the kingdom of Satan and be very non-judgmental towards her, but let her know that her sadness is coming from her not living in her vocation. She's a single woman. She's not supposed to be sleeping with anybody. Not supposed to be sleeping around. And we have brought them out of the vices that they are in simply by showing them not unconditional love, but calling out the sin. You see, the greatest sin of this generation is the loss of the sense of sin. So I'm a secular therapist and I'm saying it's her right. Have I helped her? I've not helped her because the reason why she's coming is that she's depressed because she's not living according to her human dignity. Yes, but I'm not imposing my religion. If she's a Christian, one of the things I'll tell her is, go to your church, talk to your pastor, find Christian women, surround them with. If she's a Muslim, the same thing. If she's an atheist, it's still against her dignity. So that is why the Christian meta model of the human person really works for me. And they'll say there's something different about you, but I don't know what it is. It's because I have discovered my own vocation. I use the model on myself first. Am I living a clean life? Am I trying to live a virtuous life? And then through with the character clubs we have character clubs. You can say this week we're going to work with the youth. This week we're going to work on self awareness. And the questions that come under self awareness: Who am I? Who made me? Why did he make me? So what is my purpose? Unless you've asked those 5 existential questions, why is there evil in the world? The biggest trick that Satan played was that he doesn't exist. Cheating people, he doesn't exist. So I think I'm making my own choices. So once you have the kingdom mindset, you're able to understand we have 2 kingdoms. They're not visible, but they manifest in the physical world. Whatever happens in the physical world has first happened in the spiritual world, depending on which spirit you're in touch with. So if you're in touch with the spirit, all the fruits of the spirit, love, peace, joy, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. If you're in touch with the other one, all the other things. And we live in a broken world. So people, just like we said, needed to be seen, heard, loved, understood. And once you have done that, once you have connected with the client, then then you're able to speak the truth in love and say, no, this lifestyle is what is making you sad, because people they languish in vice, and they flourish in virtue. So you lead them towards the virtue, and they actually become very happy. So the purpose of finding God in their, when they find their purpose, they will find the God of their own understanding. You as the Christian here, but you're not imposing it on them. But because of the unconditional love that you show, the love of God flows through you to the client. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. There's a lot we can talk about. The sea time is really running.
Yeah, fine.
Yes. But I just wanted you to mention something about. So currently, the government of Kenya is working to shut down the children homes. And as we have discussed, is that there's a part that plays in terms of if a child is able to get what they are not able to get from the parents, maybe the parents are dead or something. There's it helps to mitigate any trauma that they might be having. But then the government wants to shut down children homes, and I don't know what's the best model they're proposing, but I don't know what you think about that.
Okay, being in the pro-life movement, I've come to understand that a lot of the children's homes are being used as a conduit for child trafficking. Is that not a fact?
It is.
Yeah. So they might be helping people, but we live in a fallen world, and there's that very dangerous aspect of people posing as philanthropists and using the children's homes as a place for pedophiles and organ trafficking, and also the occult, child sacrifice. So there's that side of it. But what will happen is, are they going to find foster homes for these children?
That's what they're saying. But
Yeah.
I don't know how successful that will be. Will it be a case of, and I agree with what you have said, that there is definitely where children homes are used to advance other vices. But will it be a case of throwing the baby with the bath water?
Yeah, I think it should be gradual. Is it going to be very sudden? I'm not so sure about what their plan is. But if it's going to be very sudden and throwing children out into foster homes without vetting, because if you've not vetted the parents for their emotional and spiritual health and all that, like you said, then I don't know. I don't know what the future will be. But what is coming out, and there's a book which has been written, a very nice book, which I'll send you the link of, some lady called Florence. But she's actually written a book about how the model of a children's home, children growing up in an institution, is bad. She has done a lot of studies on it. And the best alternative to that, because she has done a lot of research, she has found out that one relative, if you can identify a family member and empower that family member to take in the child rather than complete strangers. So you'll find that there's an auntie in a village somewhere who can be empowered to raise that child. It's much, much better than an institution. In fact, she's the one who has said that it is not, the model of the way a child is supposed to be raised. This is completely artificial because they're being deprived of that physical touch. These people are moving in and out. She has even said that tourists, that nobody should come and volunteer in an orphanage because you are harming the child when you say bye and they've developed, and that even when the children come to hug her and to hold her and all that, people think that that is healthy attachment. It's not. It's not healthy. Like when she enters into the orphanage and all the children rush to her, that shows you a really deep need. So she says that that institution is artificial. She has done a lot of research and she has written even a handbook for people who are running institutions. But she says, if possible, please get them out of there as soon as possible to live with a family, preferably blood relatives. Empower those relatives, because sometimes those relatives say, we don't have the money, they don't have the resources. So that is the best alternative rather than complete strangers who you don't know who they are. Yeah. You're most welcome.